All right, everybody, welcome to our last section in Chapter 5, where we will be talking about our petty cash account. Um, Petty cash is not really that important in terms of like our big accounts. However, most businesses use them, and they can be kind of tricky to journalize correctly. So really make sure that you're paying attention both in the lecture today and then also the work together video. So our objectives are we're going to establish a petty cash fund, we're going to do a petty cash report, and then we're also going to replenish our petty cash fund. So first things first, what is petty cash? Petty cash is simply an amount of cash that's kept on hand and used for making small payments by the business. Essentially what a petty cash fund is for is anytime you need to buy something but it isn't worth writing a check for. So most businesses are going to keep a small amount, whether it's $100, $200, $300. That kind of depends on how often you use it and the purpose and the size of your business. Petty cash is technically an asset, so it does have a normal debit balance, increases on the debit side, decreases on the credit side. So when you establish a petty cash fund, what is happening is you are going to create this account. What I cannot stress enough is that this is the one and only time where you will actually use the account title petty cash when you're journalizing. After that, you don't use petty cash anymore, okay? Because what we're doing is we're simply establishing the fund. The rest of the time, what we're going to do is replenish it. That doesn't involve petty cash. Okay, so to establish petty cash, you debit petty cash for however much you need in your cash fund, and then you credit your actual cash account. Because remember, your actual cash account is like your checking account. So all you're doing is you're taking $100 out and you're going to put it in a cash box at your business. That's your $100 in your petty cash fund. So what that looks like is we put our date, which is the 19th, our petty cash account title goes in, and that amount is debited. Cash is credited, and then our source document number is C8. Okay, so we fill that in. That's establishing the petty cash fund. It's very easy, very simple to do. Now, moving on, we have when you need to take money out of the petty cash fund. When you do this, because you're working with cash, we still want to have proof of a petty cash payment, because when cash changes hands, there isn't any source documents for us to use. So what we fill out is called a petty cash slip. So it includes a number, a date of the payment, where it went to, the reason it was, the amount paid, the account that needs to be recorded, and then a signature of someone that approves the petty cash payment. So this is an example of a petty cash slip. You can see on January 19th, we paid to Dispatch for a newspaper ad of $14. The account it's going into is advertising expense, and it was approved by our owner, Michael Delgado. That's all it is, a petty cash slip. We just want to have that because if not, anybody can go into the petty cash fund and just take money and pay wherever. But at the end of the day, I should say technically at the end of the month, we have to journalize where all of those transactions were paid to. Okay, so we do need to have petty cash slips as examples of objective evidence. So, as the petty cash gets used, the amount in the petty cash box obviously goes down. Eventually, the fund is going to have to be replenished, okay, going back up to that $100. Typically, companies have a set amount that they don't let their cash dip below. Maybe it's $20, maybe it's $25. It could be $50, it could be $100. It just depends on how much your petty cash fund starts with. Now, we always replenish the petty cash fund at the end of the month, regardless of how much is in there, because we need to journalize where all of our transactions went during the month. So we do it regardless at the end of the month, but if it dips below a certain amount, let's say you had quite a few things that needed petty cash during the first part of the month and you have to replenish it on the 15th, that's fine. So when you go ahead and replenish your petty cash report, there's always a chance, because remember, when you're working with cash, it's very easy for there to be errors to happen. So if a petty cash on hand is less than the recorded amount, we call that cash short. This is the one that happens the most typically, because someone maybe forgot to do something, they wrote it down wrong, they didn't fill out a petty cash slip. Typically, you're going to be short on your cash. Sometimes you could be cash over, where the petty cash on hand is more than what the recorded amount says it can be. Typically, there's one person in charge of preparing a petty cash report and verifying when the petty cash fund needs to be replenished. We call that the custodian. So this is what the petty cash report looks like. We have our date and the custodian name. It happens to be the owner of our company, which is Michael Delgado. And the amount that should be in there is $100. That's what we start with. That's our fund total. During the course of January, we paid $20 for a miscellaneous expense, and we paid $14 for advertising. So our total payments were $34. Okay, we just add those two up and we put that amount. So we know for sure that we need to put $34 back in. So that's where we have that listed under the replenish amount. Does that make sense? If we paid 34 out, we need to put 34 back in. So then, according to our records, we should have $66 on hand. If you took 100 minus 34, we should have 66. Makes sense? However, when we actually total up how much is in our petty cash box, we only had $65, which means that we are cash short by $1. So we need to replenish that dollar right there. We move that over and we total that up. So we need to put the $34 in for our two expenses plus the $1 for cash short. So $35 needs to be put in to our petty cash fund to replenish it. Does that make sense? Hopefully, that's a petty cash report. Now, to actually replenish petty cash, we do have this cash short and over, which I've kind of been talking about already. Cash short and over is an expense. So when cash is short, it gets debited. When cash is over, it gets credited. Okay, like I said, most of the time we're going to be cash short, but be careful because there could be a problem or two where MindTap is being tricky and they're going to try to trick you and you could be cash over, which means you need to credit the account. So just be aware of that. Okay. So when we replenish, okay, it says, here's our transaction. On January 31st, we paid cash to replenish the petty cash fund. $35 was our total. Remember, we had miscellaneous of 20, advertising of 14, and cash short and over of $1. And the check that we paid to do this was check number 11. So what happens? We debit our miscellaneous expense for 20. We debit our advertising expense for 14. We debit our cash short and over for $1. And then we credit cash. Please note, do you see petty cash anywhere here? The answer is no. No, Mrs. T, I don't see petty cash anywhere. People get so tripped up here because they say, well, I'm replenishing petty cash, so I have to debit petty cash. No, you do not. The only time you debit petty cash is when you are establishing, when you first open that account. Otherwise, you don't touch petty cash. What you are doing is you are recording your expenses here and you're paying that out of your actual cash account. Okay? So you do not touch petty cash here. I cannot stress that enough. And some of you are going to do it anyways. And then I'm going to tell you, come back and listen to this video where I tell you do not touch petty cash. So this is what it looks like down here in our journal. Okay, we've got our date. We've got our 3 debits, miscellaneous, advertising, and cash short and over. We put those all here in our debits. We credit our cash for $35, and we put our document number C11 in here. It's been a while since we've done this and had a transaction that takes up 3 lines. Remember, all this signifies is that this transaction is all one. So you don't want to put the date down here in this second or third line, and you don't want to put the document number on the second or third line, because this is all signifying that this is one transaction. Okay? So that is how you replenish a petty cash fund. Now, again, debit card transactions, we did this last chapter. I don't know why, or last section, I don't know why they want to throw this in here, but it says you purchase supplies for $75 using a debit card. Remember, debit card simply means that it's coming out of your checking account, but because you didn't actually write a check, we use our source document, which is a memorandum. So supplies goes up with a debit, cash goes down with a credit, and you've journalized like this before. Please note the only difference is your source document is a memorandum, not a check. And that's it. So we're going to head on over to 5-4, and we're going to do our work together in MindTap. And then don't forget about the rest of your assignments as well.